We always say that time heals all wounds, but does it really? Natsume's Book of Friends is not simply about a young boy and his chubby cat. Rather, it shows the difficulty of moving on and about the self-development of Natsume Takashi. It's the most thought-provoking anime anyone has ever seen. You see, Natsume was abandoned for his ability to see things that are not visible to the human eye. His father left him with his so-called family, who never understood him or his abilities. As a result, he is often bullied for telling lies when in fact, there are beings out there that cannot be seen. As a child, he already knew how terrible people can be, as those around him only looked at him with eyes of disdain. Over the years, Natsume has learned to hide his ability to see spirits because he no longer wants to be shunned by people. Now he is living with his new foster parents, who have provided him a new home as well as a new life. Being isolated and feeling alone made Natsume closed off. He has never learned the comfort of being trusted or understood. The story of Natsume's Book of Friends begins when Natsume breaks the seal of a powerful yokai named Madara. This being is a mighty spirit that has taken the form of a lucky cat. What strikes Madara and many yokais later on in the series is that Natsume looks a lot like his predecessor Natsume Reiko. Reiko was his late grandmother who was also an outcast for seeing the supernatural. She was the creator of the Book of Friends. This book has a mystical power to hold the names of yokais. Now that it is in Natsume's possession, he wants to prevent it from getting into the wrong hands, whether it be human or yokai. With no interest in its power, Natsume makes a deal with Madara. Once all the names are given back to their respective owners, or when Natsume passes, he will then give the book to Madara. But Madara has to act as an unofficial bodyguard in the meanwhile, and is now nicknamed Nyanko-sensei. As the series progresses, the names within the book are also slowly being returned, and the audience sees Natsume's relationship with humans and yokais make progress. Natsume does not immediately open up to his human friends, and yokais are constantly attacking him for his book. His first two human friends are unsuspecting of his abilities, but that's what Natsume wants. Occasionally, Natsume would act out weird by jumping out of the way for nothing or swatting at the air. These two were always supportive of their newfound friend, never really thinking poorly of the boy they had just befriended. Later, Natsume meets others who are similar to him, who are much more involved with the supernaturals than other human beings. Some can see a little bit of yokais, others dabble in exorcism, or others who had an encounter with a yokai. This is when Natsume realizes that there are other people like him. Natsume's relationship with yokai is similar. He looks at them with wariness because he never knows what their true intentions are. Since most of the creatures he has met has caused him harm, Natsume has to be careful with them because they can endanger his life. Yet his interactions throughout the series counter this belief where all yokais cause harm, and he sees that yokais and humans are more alike than he had thought. These creatures enjoy going to festivals, having parties, and most of all, they have a heart. Some yokai approach Natsume for the sole purpose of getting their names returned to them, and Natsume does it without questions. But other yokais have stuck to Natsume because of his kindness. This is what happens with Nyanko-sensei, who gains the ability to care for Natsume, who essentially becomes his friend, and perhaps even like his own child. Nyanko-sensei doesn't recognize his emotional attachment to Natsume, which causes some fights and misunderstandings to occur at times, but they always make up. Nyanko-sensei would never admit to being attached to a human because Natsume would be the first one to leave. It is often easier to stay apart to prevent ourselves from getting hurt, and it is why many yokais choose to remain unattached to another being, as someone is always left behind. They may be creatures who have lived for decades but are none the wiser. It was Natsume's kindness that warmed its way into the lucky cat yokai, making their relationship much more attached than anyone can imagine. Over time, Natsume's relationship with humans and non-humans also improves. He no longer stays away from people and attempts to face his trauma. There were times when he would meet people from his past who had called him a fraud and a liar. At first, Natsume is very reluctant to even interact with them, but seeing their troubles made him want to help them. Despite the torture he had endured from his past, Natsume was never the type of person to forsake someone when they were in trouble. It was then that these people realized that Natsume has changed so much that he is no longer weak or scared of others. Natsume makes so much progress throughout the seasons. From the beginning, we see the face he puts in front of people, the polite mannerism that he uses to hide the trauma and nightmares that plague the character, the empty stares as he looks out into the world alone and contemplates about the life he is forced to live, where no one taught him about the supernatural and still had to endure because he craved a connection. Then, as he learns more about the humans and yokai world, he learns that such connections are a big part of life. Besides his human friends from school, he meets others who are fully involved with the supernatural as exorcists. These group of people treat yokais as their servant, and Natsume is not comfortable seeing another sentient being treated in such a way. Natsume fought against this ideology, and the exorcist was so moved by his goodwill that he asked the yokais to become his partner instead, in which they accepted because they believe that it is through their example that the relationship between exorcists and yokais would be mended. From this interaction, the relationship between the exorcist and the yokais have become more of a partnership rather than a master and servant. This shows how far Natsume has come as the bridge between the human world and the supernatural one. Even though Natsume does not know it, he has indeed become a bridge that acts as the communicator for both humans and yokais. Since he is able to understand the feelings of people from both worlds, it was so natural for him to fight for all beings he has interacted with. Although we never hear the inner thoughts of the character, that is what makes this series such a masterpiece. The audience can tell that Natsume is one of the few beings that chooses to make right with both worlds. What this means is that he will never treat yokais differently from humans and vice versa. That he sees those around him as flawed humans and yokais who embrace their human-like emotions. As such, Natsume realized the similarities between people and yokai, and finally understands why his grandmother made the book. As the name implies, the book was essentially created to build friendships, but Reiko was never honest with her feelings about wanting companionship. It was Natsume who did this when the book got into his hands. The book is the tie to keeping Natsume rooted between the human and yokais. Without the book, Natsume wouldn't have met his friends, nor the many other people that would make an impact on his life. Overall, the Book of Friends is a fitting name as it brought new things into the life of Natsume. And that is how he learns that no one can ever be truly alone, as there is always someone there by their side. This connection is what keeps everyone together as well as what makes us human, or human-like for the supernatural beings. Natsume's Book of Friends is a great depiction of how time heals all wounds. Natsume's journey to finding himself allowed him to move on from his trauma. He also learned to open his heart and gain trustworthy friends. The amount of emotions that went into the series is phenomenal through its selective music and scenes to depict the life of Natsume. At first, there is barely anyone around him, and as time goes by, Natsume is slowly surrounded by people who care and love for him. There really isn't a single moment not to love in this series. Although it may not be everyone's cup of tea due to the overwhelming amount of action-packed or romance-themed series that has taken over the anime community, Natsume's Book of Friends is very emotional and thought-provoking. The series conveyed Natsume's loneliness through the screen, and this coming-of-age story about self-acceptance is something everyone can relate to. Each story remains well thought out and carries a deep message that is derived from Natsume's encounters. As such, there is a piece of message behind Natsume's Book of Friends that cannot be put into one sentence. But there is no doubt that this series will carry out the test of time, as the anime will remain awe-inspiring even well into the future. Thank you for watching, everyone. If you watched or even read the manga of Natsume's Book of Friends, let me know and we can talk about it in the comments. Until then, I will see you all in the next one.